Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WhatCulture Horror Podcast, hosted by me, Ash Millman, and joined by he, Josh Brown,
Hello, Ash.
and also by she, Kirsten Ria.
Hello.
Now, we are here as I forgot the name again, the troublesome threesome, the gruesome threesome.
Anything you want, man. Anything you want. Anything you can stumble through, is going to be
Riders
our
of
official
Terror,
name from now on.
Dream Team. We have so many names.
The Scream group, the people who like horror movies to talk about them, the collective. We are here anyway to talk about horror movie stuff, or actually non-horror movie stuff this week, because we've talked about horror movies a lot over the past few weeks, diving into different things that make up the genre, and breaking them down and seeing how it all comes together to make scary, scary movies. Now, this week we're doing something a little bit different, where we're looking at scary, scary movies that weren't intentionally made that way. So like scary, non-horror movies and moments, because we all have those films, those moments that scarred us growing up that just have stuck with us ever since, like so many cartoons. There's so many. We're going to go into them all because we made a big list of them all, and there's just a million films that are absolutely horrible when they don't actually mean to be. So we're going to look at horror in the non-horror and kind of how that happens, how it works, and how it affects us. So I'm going to jump straight in with you guys. I'm going to open up with a question, give you the platform and say, do you think horror is scarier when it's not in a horror movie? Do you think that these unexpected moments that come out of nowhere and then stick with you forever are kind of more pertinent than actual horror movies as a medium themselves?
I mean, I want to say no, but you've touched upon something very kind of interesting there, Ash, in that I might not initially think that they're scarier than actual scary movies, but they are the ones that stay with you. And I think it's a combination of obviously watching some of these movies when we're growing up in our formative years, but other times I think the unexpected nature of seeing something horrific intentionally or otherwise in something that you just are not braced for, you're not ready for, it lingers with you and perhaps plays with your psyche in a way that a conventional horror movie doesn't, because even the scariest horror movies follow some kind of structure or rules or formula, and you can compartmentalize it in a way. Whereas if something weird turns up in The Wizard of Oz or something weird turns up in The Lord of the Rings, my brain is not prepared or even programmed to comprehend what that means. It almost defies the formula of what I'm supposed to be watching, and therefore it manages to hit you on another level, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely I could name every moment that has terrified me, not from a horror movie, because it has absolutely burned itself into my brain. But if I think about horror films, I kind of think of them as this amorphous collective of scary moments. Go, oh yeah, that was really good. Oh yeah, that was really scary. But I go in going, oh, I'm ready to be scared. I'm ready to be horrified. And if it succeeds in doing that, great, it's doing its job. But if it comes from somewhere else, I'm like, I didn't sign up for this. This is more scary than ever because I wasn't prepared. How about you, Kirsten, though? How do you feel about them?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's the preparation. Like you said, when you are going into a horror movie and you are a horror fan like us, you watch it because you enjoy that and you know that that's what you're going to get. You watch a horror movie, you know you're going to get scared, whether it's a good scared or bad scared, it doesn't matter. You know there's going to be some type of creepy goings on. But when you go into a film which you otherwise think could be, I don't know, maybe a thriller or like a kids movie, and again, that horror aspect is completely taken out of it. It's just not being prepared. It's just like, no, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for this hideous monster to scar me for life. And especially as a child, it's horrible. Even as a child, I loved watching horror movies. I loved watching Alien and stuff when I was a really young kid. But again, when you're sat there, like I said, watching something like Scooby-Doo and out of nowhere some weird, creepy zombie creature comes out, you're like, hang on a second. No. This is supposed to be lovely, fun Scooby-Doo, not some little horror movie. So I think it's just the lack of preparedness. Is that a word? When you're going into something that you know is going to be scary or not. Yeah,
definitely. Scooby-Doo, absolute shout, by the way. I loved watching Scooby-Doo growing up, and I could name all of the monsters because all of them terrified me, as I was not prepared for anything growing up, because I was so sheltered and lovely and oh, I love all the soft creatures of the world. And watching Scooby-Doo, I was like,
dude,
a fish monster.
Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island especially
is
the
so good.
Scariest crap growing up, because in the other Scooby-Doo episodes, it's fine. It's often a man in a costume at the end. It's just some bloke from down the road, some, fella who lives on your street. Not in Zombie Island. They're actual zombies brought to life by a curse. And you got those horrible, I think they're are they cat creatures as well? Who kind of
cat werewolf women.
Yeah, werewolf women. Also very scary. All of those Scooby-Doo animated films, I think, informed my love of horror growing up in such a strange way. I used to watch those on VHS all the time.
Yeah, there's like a weird thing where you're drawn to it as a kid, I think. I feel like most of these come from children's movies or kind of PG-13 offerings where you're like, I wasn't prepared literally as in age as well as in mentality for this sort of thing. But they do kind of fascinate you and draw you to horror later on in life, I think. They either scar you and you go, oh, I'm never going near that again. Or you go, wow, why was I scared of that? Why was that so creepy? That was really interesting. Let's watch more of it. I was definitely in the former camp, by the way. Like, I didn't like horror movies for ages. I was like, this is too much. I can't deal with it. Even going to the cinema, I was like, I will only watch horror movies at home for the longest time. I always loved them, but was like, I can't watch them. They're too much. Just describe all the plots to me, please. And then like caught up with them over the years and got really, really into them. But yeah, horror, I think, is such a fascinating concept, and kind of how it's instilled from a young age is probably the most pertinent part. So let's leap into it and talk about kind of what are our favorite non-horror movies that have the horror kick that scared you or, you know, like impressed you and made you go back to them more.
I feel like everyone kind of has this moment with Fellowship of the Ring where you first get a glimpse of evil Bilbo, where he's having this quite tender conversation with Frodo, and he sort of sees that Frodo's wearing the ring, and he gets that kind of like desire back, the animalistic desire to take back his precious, essentially. But then, looking back at it now, the CGI is bad, obviously. But in the moment where his kind of face turns, it's a subtle effect where it turns from the actor to this kind of exaggerated CGI monster just for a fleeting second or so. But it's so effective, right? And I don't think it's outrageous for me to compare the Fellowship of the Ring in this moment to like The Exorcist, where you get like the flashes of the face. It's almost on that level. Like, it's informed by that kind of brand of storytelling. And I don't think it's a coincidence that director Peter Jackson, you know, made horror movies before this, obviously loves the genre and brought elements of that over to the Fellowship of the Ring, not only in this scene, but, you know, in the Mines of Moira and stuff, and, you know, the kind of horror-infused elements of the orcs, the big battles, the ring wraiths, you know, stuff like that. There are horror elements all the way through that kind of like fantasy setting. But for me, it's absolutely Bilbo. Like, me and my friends, even before we knew each other, like, we all have this part of our history where we were completely terrified by Bilbo's horrible face in the Fellowship of the Ring. And I feel like that might be a universal fear now at this point, because it's so well done.
Yeah, that one, I was writing a list about this the other day. I was writing about horrific moments come out of nowhere. And I kind of centered it mostly around horror movies that got more intense than you expected. But there was a few in there that I was like, okay, this has to come from a non-horror movie. And Fellowship went straight in there, but not for Bilbo's moment, for Galadriel. Like,
oh my God.
Galadriel absolutely like shook me up when that happened. I was like, oh my God, this wonderful soft lady of light who's all things good is evil and has evil in her. And I feel like the way that kind of the films, all of the Lord of the Rings films, deal with good and evil, and there being shades of it in everyone as well. And then it coming from places that you least expect in the good ones is a great, great way. Just a great filmmaking technique, and something that obviously has stuck with people growing up. Bilbo is definitely like king of the crop for that sort of thing. Galadriel.
I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because there were two scenes that I used to have to skip when watching The Lord of the Rings, and it was those two, you know what I mean? Because you get, like you said, it's so interesting because you're almost kind of, because you're not used to, especially when you're growing up, you're not kind of used to the complexities of movies, and you see things in kind of like the binary nature of good and evil, like black and white, stuff like that. So you're almost lulled into a false sense of security with these characters who are supposed to be the good guys, and then they show you that kind of the demons lurking underneath, or the shades of grey that they do have. And that's why I think it especially catches you off guard, alongside some, you know, really impressive filmmaking as well.
Definitely. How about you, Kirsten? Any thoughts on Lord of the Rings? Was there any moments for you?
Yeah, no, it was definitely the Bilbo bit. Yeah, I remember I didn't watch Lord of the Rings for a while because they were just so long. And I remember my mum sitting me down. She was like, you should watch it. And was really enjoying it because it was all bright and colourful. And then, yeah, just Bilbo transforming into some sort of demon out of nowhere. That did sort of etch itself into my brain. And yeah, I hated that. And like you said, Josh, that was one of the scenes where for a long time, whenever I used to watch it, I'd be like, oh, that scene's coming up. I just won't look. I won't look. I'll hear it. And then I'll look back after it's done. Yeah, that scared the crap out of me as a kid. It literally like scarred itself into my brain, where, you know, when you like close your eyes and you can still see it. I had that for ages afterwards, like as a kid. And I was just like, I'm never going to get that, that picture out of my brain, my poor little child brain. Yeah, it was horrible. I hated horrible scene. Ugh.
It's such a good jump scare as well, like out of
really
nowhere,
is.
the Bilbo one. Like, it works on a scary level, but it works on the catching you off guard as well. Like, even when you know it's coming, you're like, films, calm down, please. But yeah, it's way too much. How about you, Kirsten? What other films do you want to bring to the fore for this non-horror scary compilation?
For me, it has to be Return to Oz. This is one that even my mum will bring up from time to time. She's like, I don't know why I used to watch that film as a child. Like, I used to hide behind the sofa for particular scenes in that movie, because it's not like it's just one scene. There are plenty of scenes in Return to Oz which are terrifying. But one that always, there's two that really resonate with me. And one is where Dorothy goes to, I think she's like an evil queen or a witch or something, but basically she turns people to stone, and she's cut up all the women's heads, and she uses their heads to like interchange because she wants to be like beautiful, and so she interchanges different heads with different people so that she can pick and choose whenever, like a little accessory, which at the time was fine. I was like, okay, this is cool. And then she's going through this like sort of hallway, and there's always glass cabinets with people's heads, and they're all sort of like got their eyes closed and they're little staring at it. And I was like, okay, this is getting a little bit creepy, but you know, very good. Like, even as a kid, I appreciated the cinematography of it, and I was like, this is very cool. But it's when she like steals her key, and then she runs after her, she's just going, Dorothy girl, and I'm like, she's got no head whatsoever. Oh my god, like that terrified me as a kid, and like even to the point where like all my mum would have to do was just go, Dorothy girl, and I would just like flashback. So I was like, like hidden behind the sofa, just like shaking, like, oh my god, it scared the crap out of me. But one that I also remembered the other day when I was thinking about this, because I was talking about this on Twitter, and it's also the Gnome King in Return to Oz. And it's not just the fact that he himself is just this big, scary, like mountain stone man, but it's just, there's something really uncanny about the like the stop. It's like stop go animation almost, because it's just, I just don't like the way it looks, okay? I don't like the way it moves. I don't like the way he moves. And even when he's like a normal man, it's because he's like all grey, but he has like these piercing sort of blue eyes, but like the whites of his eyes are all red, and no, just didn't like it. And then there's the bit where he eats the egg and then he starts freaking out because he's like allergic to chicken eggs for some reason. I don't know why, but oh no, that was another one that as a kid I was like, this can't be in a kid's movie. Like, this is terrifying. Like, he's eating people, for crying out loud. Like, what's happening? Yeah, so Return to Oz, like, even someone said the other day about the Wheelers as well, about how they're really creepy. Like, that whole movie, that there's a reason that movie isn't as well known as the first Wizard of Oz, and it's because it's definitely a horror movie. It's definitely a children's horror movie. There is no way that any parent should be showing that to their children. It is terrifying. That whole movie is terrifying.
It's one of those ones that I haven't actually seen, but I hear every time I hear someone talk about it, they are like shaking like a leaf. They're like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm so interested in all the imagery of it that I've seen and looked it up, and it sounds horrible. It sounds like it capitalizes on like the Uncanny Valley stuff. Like, it is what the images I've seen of it, and stop motion stuff. Like, it just sounds horrible. The first one was enough for me. Wizard of Oz was absolutely enough for me. The flying monkeys scene used to, oh no, couldn't watch that. Even just the trees when she's walking through, Dorothy's walking through the trees, and they start like lobbing apples at her. No, thank you.
I fully agree. Like, I've never seen Return to Oz, and I think it's partly because the Wizard of Oz was enough to scare me, the same as you, Ash. Like, the flying monkeys, obviously. But I had a thing about just the Wicked Witch of the West in general. There was something about her when I was growing up that was just like the archetypal kind of villain of my dreams. There was something like that performance is like genuinely really good. I think, it obviously is like very pantomime-y, but in such a on-point way. And I feel like everything from the voice to the look to the melting scene, it just has kind of like again, like that kind of mix of fantasy and horror that I guess I was just incredibly susceptible towards when I was quite young and growing up and stuff. So The Wizard of Oz was always a hard watch, actually. I feel like there was always those kids' films like this that seemed to be made not just for, to get kids a nice moral lesson and to have a good time, but to also put the fear of God in them for like a little bit. Like, and then you watch the sequel, which by all accounts, according to Kirsten there, is just a complete surreal trip of nightmarish imagery and intense visuals that does not seem intended for a young audience whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. They market these as like, oh, have a fun little magical horror movie time, fantasy movie time that then turns into a horror movie, and it's rancid. What did it for me growing up was I've been thinking about this, and there's many films that scared me for ridiculous reasons, but the one that I feel is most justified is The Brothers Grimm, and that even now I can't watch it now, even though I know that it's fine. I've seen much worse in many other horror movies since. This like dark fantasy version of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, which kind of is more horror leaning than other stuff, but still arguably just a dark fantasy movie. The images in that are the worst thing I've ever seen. Like where there's a horse that eats a load of spider eggs, that is fed loads of spider eggs. And then the blob that steals a kid's face out of a well, wears it, runs around as the gingerbread man going, I taste good. Hated it. Brothers Grimm. Like, I feel like the Return to Oz and Brothers Grimm would go together as like a double whammy of disgusting nonsense. Like, they fit together very well. They're awful movies.
Again, it's kind of like that thing of twisting something, especially as a kid, that you kind of find comforting. You know what I mean? You got like these classic fairy tales, these things that should be relatively safe. And even though it is a horror movie, I had a similar experience with Darkness Falls, which I knew nothing about, other than the fact that it was, a killer tooth fairy. And to me, like as an 11 or 12-year-old who thought he was quite, versed on horror at the time, would sneak into his dad's DVD collection and watch like Blade and stuff, and thought, vampires fine, werewolves fine. The idea of a killer tooth fairy, absolutely not. Like, I couldn't even watch it to this day. I've still only seen parts of it because the idea of that concept of it, was enough to just veer me off it for forever.
Oh, I feel like you'd be disappointed if you watch past that first, like, the opening bit of Darkness Falls, which is horrible, and then the rest is like, go on then. But, like, the opening bit, the worst thing in the world. Even now, again, another one that's still now, I'm like, oh, please, put that away. Too much. I think, like, it'd be remiss kind of to not pull it back to the 80s as well with this, because there's this weird period of horror, or just normal movies that turn into horror. In the 80s, it's like a dark patch where Disney did loads of really weirdly offbeat stuff for them that they kind of try and cover up afterwards. And Don Bluth films were like at their peak and doing absolute horrors to children worldwide. You spoke about your tweet the other day, Kirsten. I think it was from Scarred for Life podcast, did a great little thing talking about The Last Unicorn as well. Scarred for Life podcast does this whole topic where they talk about things that scarred you as a kid, and they do it really well. They're talking about The Last Unicorn. And that one, like this 80s madness, absolutely, that was another one that just stuck with me for ages afterwards, because I thought it was this lovely unicorn movie. I go and watch it, everything would be good and pure with the world. There was a little talking butterfly, there was a magician, there was some evil to be like defeated with unicorn magic. But no, it is literally just an existential nightmare. It's all about like this unicorn fight, like being the last unicorn, finding a place in the world, discovering what it means to have regret, discovering what it means to be the last of her kind, and having all of these horrible moments where she's shell-shocked and just suffering from PTSD from being a unicorn that's turned into a human. And it's really, really upsetting. Like, it just makes me feel awful, the whole film. There's no nice bits about it. Even the end is just like, well, that was an awful experience. I'm going to go chill out with the unicorns for a bit now. And then it ends, I'm like,
I'd never even heard of this. Then I saw you tweet about it the other day, and I was like, what is this thing that's like scarred Ash for life? How have I got my entire life not even knowing what this is, and yet it's had this deeply traumatic effect on you? So now I feel like my childhood was a total success that I somehow managed to avoid this forever.
It's that 80s period. It is that 80s period where it's like my parents love those like horrible films from then, the Last Unicorns from then. They showed me like I'm trying to think of the other like Disney films from then. Black Cauldron's one of my favorite films ever. But all the other stuff from that period, they kind of really loved and then showed to me. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened in this period of time? Why are you passing this down to me? All of these like hidden horrible gems that are just made for hurting your eyes. But yeah. Oh, sorry, I've gone really off on a tangent. That's about the 80s.
Pinocchio, when the kid turns into a donkey, that was also another Disney film that was like, just scared me. And also the whale and that. I just have a phobia of like the sea, so that didn't help anyway. But yeah, the whale scene and the kids turning into donkeys in Pinocchio was terrifying. I feel like Disney back then just was sort of like, let's find a way to not only bring joy into children's lives, but to keep them in line by just terrifying them to their core so that they don't like, oh, you can't be naughty, otherwise you'll turn into a donkey, or oh, don't go wandering off on your own or a whale will eat you. And you're like, okay, mother. Just like Josh said, putting that fear of God in you, so you're just sort of like, okay, I'll be a good girl, I promise. Like, oh, it was, Disney went through a dark time.
Yeah, the Pinocchio one as well. I feel like the scariest part of that is they never resolved the donkey thing. They're like, oh, all these boys got turned into donkeys and sent off to like salt mines to go mine forever or something. And they never fixed that. They're like, oh, okay, we'll shut down this horrible island. But you know, if you're a donkey and you've been sent off, so
you're just a donkey now.
I'm afraid.
That is your life now.
Unlucky.
Oh,
it's not Disney at all, actually, but it's kind of on the same lines. Obviously, you know, being a superhero fan growing up, I watched a lot of Batman, and while I didn't watch Tim Burton's original Batman much, I had Batman Returns, and I used to watch that all the time, just out of like pure self-hate, I think, because I didn't like watching it because I was so scared of every single thing in there. And there was a lot of kind of outcry after that final Tim Burton Batman movie came out for it being too dark, and that's why they pivoted into Batman Forever. But you can totally see why, like watching that growing up, like I've got this image of Batman as this kind of like John Wick style killer. Like he was more or less a slasher in that movie. There's one point early on where, you know, he's kind of like driving along in the Batmobile, taking absolutely no prisoners, and he turns on his little exhaust thing and he sets a bunch of dudes on fire. Like he just lets them burn to death. And I'm like, who is this guy? Who is this like psychopath? But like in this movie, like Batman himself is terrifying, but then you've got like some of the most scary villains joining him. You've got stupid, sexy Catwoman who's also like putting birds in her mouth and kind of kicking the crap out of everyone, and she dies and then gets like licked by cats and she comes back. It's very weird, but she has a sick apartment. But then you've got Danny DeVito, who is, you know, a lovely man, but also is a gross man and can play gross people so well. And he plays the Penguin here with this kind of like manic, psychotic, sleazy energy. And it's just, it's so
the black
creepy.
goo as well.
The black goo.
Just constantly comes out with mouth. It's like,
the grunts, the black goo. It's oh man, like Danny DeVito's Penguin is like one of the all-time best movie villains because he's so gross but so compelling, and you can't take your eyes off him. But this is just, you know, because it's a Tim Burton movie, all of his movies have elements of, you know, gothic horror, these kind of like creepy like dark images and dark characters and stuff. But I feel like Batman Forever, he was really working through some issues. Not Batman Forever, Batman Returns. He was working through some issues in that movie, man. He was going through some stuff in that production, I have to assume, because that is maybe his like darkest film in terms of just how horrible the characters are.
Yeah, there's this weird like boundary where it comes to stuff that's scary and non-horror stuff, where it's like it's so fantastical that it's almost too much. You're like, oh no, this is like it goes so far the other way. It's not like that realistic fantasy where it's like, oh, okay, this is grounded with this, that, or the other. It goes so far past what could be like feasible in a world that it becomes absolutely like terrifying, which I think is kind of what the Batman like effect is, where it's like, oh, it's this believable comic book world, and we've seen it in like comics before, we've seen all these different things for it, but then it's just pushed that step further, and it's like, oh, here's Black Goo Penguin, here's all these horrible things, and it just all is a bit even Catwoman, like all of it's so gloriously campy that watching it when you're not ready for it, you're like, oh geez, what's this?
I remember even like being right when it starts and it gives you the backstory for Oswald Cobblepot the Penguin, and he just gets like chucked in it while he's a baby in his little pram, and he gets like chucked over the side into a river. Then he goes and lives with some penguins in the sewer, and even that, like combined with I think it's Danny Elfman's score, is just, it makes for that, like you said, Ash, that kind of fantasy land that's pushed so far beyond any kind of sense of, I don't even know what you would call it, but it's just pushed beyond the limits of what you kind of deem feasible, that all of this ridiculous kind of stuff and these terrible fates for these characters, they're brushed off by executives. But when you're like a bit younger, or even now, to be fair, like like there are some horrific implications there that just more or less go unanswered or unnoticed, like the people being turned into donkeys and sent into the mines. You know what I mean? Because it's in this realm of fantasy, it's almost like, well, we don't need to address that. It's just a silly kids movie. It's just a silly fantasy world. Nothing really has consequences. But you know, when you're invested in a story, you have to think about, well, what are those consequences? What are those missing children going to do? What is this person that Batman's just set on fire going to do now? How can he be a hero?
No, it's this. I feel like it gets pushed to the point of like psychedelia is kind of what it is. It's like, oh, okay, here's fantasy, and then there's bad acid trip. You're stuck in it. Deal with it. Deal with these horrible images being blasted at you, and you know you can turn off the TV and kind of walk away from it, but you're sucked into this horrible like, oh, I need to see how this plays out so something nice happens, and nothing nice ever happens because they're horrible, or something nice happens straight away afterwards to kind of like go as a palate cleanser, and you're like, did I just have a nightmare in the middle of this movie? Like Watership Down with Fiver's visions. I know, Kirsten, you spoke about Watership Down before. Tell us about Watership Down, please.
I have never properly watched Watership Down because it is just a horrible, horrible movie. And they play it every Christmas. Like, why? That's like every Christmas, just like, we're just going to put Saw on, you know, just death, just lots and lots of death. Like, it's horrible, but it's just it's such a disturbing animation that it's just, it just really got me. Like, even as a child, and obviously I love animals. Like, I loved them as a child. I love them now. And just watching these poor rabbits in almost like this sort of World War sort of scenario where they're getting like blown up almost. Like literally all I can remember is just these poor rabbits just being like blasted to pieces, and there's blood everywhere, and the way that they're drawn, they just look like they're in agony. And I just was like, I don't want to watch this. Like, I don't understand. And then they would put it on in like schools and like secondary school. And I'm just like, no, this is not for children. It's horrible. So like, I've never watched the entirety of Watership Down because I can't. It's just disturbing. The animation disturbs me. The plot disturbs me. And yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to watch animated rabbits get blown to pieces. I'm sorry. I apologize, but it's just, I hate it. I will never, ever watch it because it's just disturbing. I just can't deal with it. It's just one of those things that just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, it's rather tellingly, it's one of my dad's like favorite films ever. So I've seen it a lot of times, and every time all of us sit there and go, oh, that's really horrible. Every time he puts it on, all my family go, oh gosh, that's not very nice. These poor rabbits. And when Fiver's having the visions of a burrow being filled in by like a land corporation that are turning it into houses, and you see, and then Captain Holly comes along and is like, oh yeah, Fiver, your vision actually happened. Those fields of blood that you saw actually happened. Here's a load of suffocating rabbits getting buried with like dirt. I was like, oh, good, thank you. Good old Easter watch this is. It always comes on Easter as well, Christmas and Easter. Yeah. And
what is wrong with the world?
It's like, I feel like that one, I guess because I've seen it so many times, I've had to look at it with like the critical eye, where it's like, it's a great film that teaches children about death, like because of the end and the way that kind of the hero's story plays out in it, and him going on to the next life and all that sort of thing. But it's a really horrible way of getting there. It's not like, you know, like with Bambi, when his like mother is shot, like that, teaching children about death that way feels just cruel. It feels nasty and it feels like exploitative almost when you're a kid watching it and going, oh my God, I have to come to grips with these horrible, horrible feelings of loss that you don't know what to do with just yet. And Watership Down definitely capitalizes on that, and that kind of strange liminal space of, oh, this is a very lovely concept of a load of rabbits going on an adventure, but also they're all going to have horrible, horrible things happen to them along the way. They're going to be buried alive and caught in traps and have massive fights and rip each other apart. And oh yeah, great, thanks.
It's not even a horror. It's not even a movie or a TV show. I suppose it later was, but you know Where the Wild Things Are. It was eventually a movie, but I remember we in primary school, so when I was very, very young, we listened to the audiobook, or I guess a reading of it for whatever reason. And I found that idea so frightening and the book itself so frightening that I was the only person who had to leave the class. I couldn't even be there while it was being read out. I was such a big softie that I couldn't be there while Where the Wild Things was being read. And that got to a point where I can't remember anything about the actual story itself. I just remember the sensation of being scared and being fearful about whatever was going on. That when the movie came out, the Spike Jonze movie, which by all account is, quite good and quite cuddly, especially compared to the book, I suppose, in some ways, in terms of visuals. It's like just the idea of that movie scared me because I had this lingering kind of feeling from my childhood, even though I was like grown up by then. Wasn't really scared by the concept. It's funny how things from your childhood, whether they're related to these movies or horror movies or non-horror movies, horror moments, like they do stay with you in a way that kind of has a strange effect on how you view, not only media, but I guess kind of like parts of the world, parts of culture. And like, it's strange how something so kind of innocuous or kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things can have such a profound effect on you. Something that someone wouldn't think probably twice about when making a movie kind of can have this strange unintended knock-on effect for people's lives or whatever.
Definitely. One that I like, it shouldn't have like terrified me as much as it did. It literally, I had like a recurring nightmare about pterodactyls for so long when I was growing up. Like it became a real problem. I had this like real long stint of pterodactyl nightmares. I can remember it vividly now, the way it played out. But anyway, it was born from Jurassic Park 3, and it wasn't even a pterodactyl scene. It was the Spinosaurus and the T-Rex fighting in that. I had to turn it off. Like I had to turn it off. Like that was like the non-horror movie moment that was just too horrific. Like that shouldn't have really scared me because it's just some dinosaurs doing some dinosaur things. And I've seen all the other Jurassic Parks and wasn't scared of them. So like dinosaurs doing dinosaur things, dinosaurs going to do what dinosaurs going to do. And then Jurassic Park 3 absolutely hammered home this inherent fear of dinosaurs, which aren't going to get me. That I feel like there's quite a long period of time between when dinosaurs were around and now. And, I feel like I can safely say I'm safe from dinosaurs. But even now, looking at pictures of them, sometimes I have to go, ooh, no. If someone talks about pterodactyls, I'm like,
yeah.
No,
I must admit, that scene with the pterodactyls is quite terrifying. Like, they're just all teaming up to kill that one guy. But it's that one, like, pterodactyl that when they're, like, the camera pans over and he just kind of, like, looks over at the camera like, what you gonna do about it, bitch? And it's just sort of like, oh, they're clever. I don't know what they're doing. And it's like, that's what's terrifying. It's like the same with the first Jurassic Park with the whole clever girl. Like the scary part is knowing that these dinosaurs are actually a little bit more clever than you think they might be. And like it's just like no, I'm good. I just want them to have like small tiny brains and be stupid and dumb. Like I don't want them plotting against me, trying to drown me in a river. Like I'm good, thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm with you both. I'm so pleased you mentioned Jurassic Park 3 because I had a very similar fear of pterodactyls. Like it was irrational because, like you say, the threat of being taken away by a pterodactyl right now is probably quite low. But at the same time, when I was like, I don't know, however old I was, 10 or something, I thought, well, what if there is an island where these dinosaurs are being cloned and then they fly out of the island because they've got wings now and they can come straight for me in my house and take me away? Like Jurassic Park 3 in particular, for as lot as it gets like crapped on, is scary. Like a lot, even though there's not much kind of like different from depiction of the dinosaurs from the first two films. Like it's a step up in terms of intensity. I feel like like without the kind of perhaps the whimsy of Spielberg, they just sort of doubled down on dinosaurs are scary, and we're going to show these really intelligent beasts tearing these people apart and being absolute dicks to them, and we're going to kind of scare the audience this time around. And I feel like that's kind of being carried on in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom a little bit, like that kind of same horror vibe, but for some reason Jurassic Park 3 managed to nail it. I don't know how, I don't know why, because the first Jurassic Park has that, what's the little boy where he's got like, I think he spits the little dinosaur.
Oh, I don't know what it's called. Yeah,
that was horrible. Yes,
yeah,
awful.
Because he's all listening and
it's
like
it's like begins with a D or something, like a I don't know, it's a Spitosaurus, the little one, but it's horrible. I know, it's horrible. That pterodactyls was the big recurring nightmare. Jurassic Park 3. I'm glad we've all bonded over Jurassic Park because that was a real problem for me. This is like a therapy session now. I'm like, oh God, thanks. The other one was the Time Machine, which not the new version. The new version's still scary, but the old one, I can't even remember what decade it's released in because I just never want to watch it again. I think it was the 60s maybe. But it's like about the race of underground warlocks who have like, they're not anything spooky. They just walk very slowly towards the camera with like reflective cat eyes in this one scene. And nightmares for months. And I didn't know what they were called because I watched it young enough that the impression was on me. I think I called them the Dulocks or something for ages and was like, oh, these crazy monsters are going to get me one, please, the monsters. And that was a real problem for me for ages. I'm just unburdening all these things that, upset me as a kid.
I like that, Ash, because I'm seeing myself in your kind of experiences all just slightly different because I also had a problem with the Time Machine, but it was actually the remake. It was I think is it Guy Pearce in the remake?
It's a great film. I love the remake. The original one though.
See, I've never seen the original and I was scared of the remake. Like the idea when I think it's like is it like the future he goes to towards the end? I don't know because I only watched it once and was so scared I couldn't go back to it or even watch the original that I wasn't a fan and I was traumatized. And this is genuinely it's been really what would I even say? Warming to hear you guys have these same deep-seated issues that I've had about more or less the same films. And please, it's not just me who had to go through all this stuff when I was a dumb kid.
Did you see the Time Machine, Kirsten? Have you seen that one?
No, I don't think so.
Watch it. It's horrible. It's so scary. He make sure the kids are out of the house. I'm like, you know what I even put on the other day was The Labyrinth, which I love. Yeah. And I watched it with my 2-year-old. And just that first scene when you see the little gremlins, I looked at them and I thought, they're scarier than I remember. And I was like, maybe we shouldn't watch this. You're 2 years old. This is a little bit creepy. But yeah, it's like as an adult, you're like, it's fine. Like, it's a good movie and there's music and all that sort of stuff. But there's just certain bits. And I think it's the uncanny valley of certain things, especially with puppetry as well. The Labyrinth has some really brilliant puppets. But when you look at it through the eyes of an adult and you think, oh, I was a kid watching this, how does that not scare me? Like some of them are really creepy looking. I think puppets as well as like Dark Crystal as well. There's like certain puppets in Dark Crystal that are just a bit like, maybe not like maybe don't let kids watch that. Like, it can just be. It's just a bit too uncanny to be to not unnerve you. The Dark Crystal, absolutely. That was going to be like the mic drop at the end. The Dark Crystal. Haunting or horrible. When they said they were doing the new series, I was like, oh, that's exciting. I'm not going to watch it because they're horrible. I know these Jim Henson puppets need not bother me. I have like a friend who absolutely loves it and like uses it. she's used it as like oh, hey, do you want to come over and watch the Dark Crystal kind of movie? And honestly, it upsets me and blows my mind that it could be used in that sort of way because it's horrible and upsetting and just too much. Maybe it's the whole like, oh, you need to put arm around you watching the Dark Crystal. But
that's weird, man. I think you've got to keep an eye on her because she's going to get contacted by the police soon, I think. That's not a good move, that, I don't think.
No, honestly, she told me, I was like, horrible. Don't tell me that again.
Crazy.
Do you guys have any films you want to shout out for this ending moment, or do you want to end on like Dark Crystal and chill? It's not
I don't think I've got anything better than Dark Crystal and chill, I think that it might have peaked then. I think I'm going to sit this one out and leave it to Kirsten if she's got anything.
The only other one I had was Witches, which was a very good film to watch as a child, which you just couldn't imagine how creepy they're going to make them look. It's just the fact that I won't give it away in case people like haven't actually seen it, but if you haven't, like, what the hell have you been doing? But there's just so many bits. It's not just how the witches look, but it's how they like transform into witches. But it's also the way that they like the things they do to children. It's not fun. It's not fun. Watching that at the same age as the kids are in the movie was terrifying. I was terrified as a kid, thinking that I was just going to get abducted by witches and turned into, well, God knows what. Like it was, they were Oh yeah, Angelica Houston is superb in that film. How can someone so beautiful be so terrifying? Like, no, yeah. So Witches is a brilliant one, but yeah, Dark Crystal is I think definitely takes the cake.
Oh, it does. Dark Crystal and The Witch is definitely, absolutely. I'm glad you've mentioned that one because, horrible. The little rubbery faces. No, thank you. But yes, right. I'm gonna end this now. End this nightmare of just us splurting about horrible non-horror movies that have very horror moments in them, and ask you guys, what is the scariest film you've seen that wasn't intended to be scary, or what non-horror movie has the scariest moments in it? I know we haven't actually even spoke about PB's Big Adventure with Large Marge or Fire in the Sky. So if you guys want to talk about those or mention anything from them, then please do so in the comment section below. But yeah, as for now, this has been the What Culture Horror Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. If you just search for the What Culture Horror Podcast, you can tell us things there. You can ask us questions, tell us what you want us to cover. And in the meantime, please come back, watch more of our videos on What Culture Horror. There is loads of fun horror content on there. And you can catch me on Twitter at Ash Millman. You can catch Josh on Twitter at
Josh Broon with 2 O's. And
you can catch Kirsten on Twitter at
Kirsten Ria with 2 A's.
Yes, and What Culture, the horror's Twitter is at WCulture Horror. I keep having to remember which bit has been trimmed. Like I keep saying, what's the horror? But no, WCulture Horror. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.